this is the, let me get my information straight. This is the Alan Mandelbaum translation of the Divine Comedy, graciously provided by the worldofdante.org. And let's get started. When I had journeyed half our life's way, I found myself within a shadowed forest, where I had lost the path that does not stray. Ah, it is hard to speak of what it was, that savage forest, dense and difficult, which even in recall renews my fear. So bitter death is hardly more severe, but to retell the good discovered there, I'll also tell the other things I saw. I cannot clearly say how I had entered the wood. I was so full of sleep, just at the point where I had abandoned the true path. But when I'd reached the bottom of a hill, it rose along the boundary of the valley that had harassed my heart with so much fear. I looked on high and saw shoulders clothed already by the rays of that same planet which serves to lead men straight along all roads. At this my fear was somewhat quieted, for through the night of sorrow I had spent, the lake within my heart felt terror present. And just as he who, with exhausted breath, having escaped from sea to shore, turns back to watch the dangerous waters he had quit, so did my spirit, still a fugitive, turn back to look intently at the past that never has let any man survive. I let my tired body rest a while. Moving again, I tried the lonely slope, my firm foot always the one below. And almost where the hillside starts to rise, look there, a leopard, very quick and lithe, a leopard covered with a spotted hide. He did not disappear from my sight, but stayed. Indeed, he so impeded my ascent that I had often to turn back again. That time was the beginning of the morning. The sun was rising now in fellowship with the same stars that had escorted it. When the divine love first moved those things of beauty, so that the hour and the gentle season gave me good cause for hopefulness on seeing that beast before me with its speckled skin, but hope was hardly able to prevent the fear I had felt when I beheld the lion. His head held high and ravenous with hunger, even the air around him seemed to shudder. This lion seemed to make his way against me. And then a she-wolf showed herself. She seemed to carry every craving in her leanness. She had already brought despair to many. The very sight of her so weighted me with fearfulness that I had abandoned hope of ever climbing up that mountain slope. Pardon me. Even as he who glories while he gains will, when the time has come to tally loss, lament with every thought and turn despondent. So was I when faced that restless beast, which, even as she stalked me, step by step, had thrust me back to where the sun is speechless. While I retreated down to the lower ground, before my eyes there suddenly appeared one who seemed faint because of the long silence. When I saw him in that vast wilderness, "Have pity on me," were the words I cried. "Whatever you may be, a shade, a man." He answered me, "Not man. I was once a man. Both of my parents came from Lombardy, and both claimed Mantua as a native city. And I was born, though late, sub Julio. I lived in Rome under the good Augustus, the season of the false and lying gods. I was a poet, and I sang the righteous son of... forgive me, Anchises, who had come from Troy when flames destroyed the pride of Ilium. But why do you return to wretchedness? Why not climb up the mountain of delight, the origin and cause of every joy? And you are then that Virgil, you, the fountain that freely pours so rich a stream of speech, I answered him with shame upon my brow. O light and honor of all other poets, May my long study and the intense love that made me search your volume serve me now. You are my master and my author, you, the only one from whom my writing drew the noble style for which I had been honored. You see that beast that made me turn aside. Help me, O famous sage, stand against her, for she has made my blood and pulses shudder. It is another path you must take, he answered when he saw my tearfulness. If you would leave this savage wilderness, the beast that is the cause of your outcry allows no man to pass along her track, but blocks him even to the point of death. Her nature is so squalid, so malicious, that she can never sate her greedy will. When she has fed, she is hungrier than ever. She mates with the many living souls and shall yet mate with many more, till the greyhound arrives, inflicting painful death on her. That hound will never feed on her land or pewter, but find his fare in wisdom, love, and virtue. His place of birth shall be between two felts. He will restore the low-lying Italy, for which the maid Camilla died of wounds, and Nissus, Turnus, and Euryalus. He will hunt the beast through every city until he thrusts her back again to hell, from which she was first sent above by envy. Therefore, I think and judge it best for you to follow me, and I shall guide you, taking you from this place through an eternal place, where you shall hear the howls of desperation and see the ancient spirits in their pain, as each of them laments his second death. You will see, and you shall see those souls who are content within the fire, where they hope to reach whenever that may be the blessed people. If you would then ascend as high as these, a soul more worthy than I am will guide you. I'll leave you in her care when I depart, because that emperor who reigns above, since I have been rebellious to his law, will not allow me entry into the city. He governs everywhere, but rules from there. There is his city, his high capital. Oh, happy those he chooses to be there. And I reply, O poet, by that God whom you have never come to know, I beg you, that I may flee these evil and worse evils, to lead me to the place of which you spoke, that I may see the gateway of St. Peter and those whom you describe as sorrowful. Then he set out, and I moved on behind him. Canto 2, Inferno. The day was now departing. The dark air released the living beings of the earth from work and weariness, and I myself, alone, prepared to undergo the battle, both of the journeying and of the pity, which memory, mistaking not, shall sow. O muses, O high genius, help me now. O memory that set down what I saw, here shall your excellence reveal itself. I started, poet, you who are my guide, see if the force in me is strong enough for you to let me face that rugged pass. You say that he who fathered Silvius, while he was still corruptible, had journeyed into the deathless world with his live body. For if the enemy of every evil was courteous to him, considering all he would cause and who and what he was. That does not seem incomprehensible, since in the Empyrean heaven he was chosen to father honored Rome and her empire. And if the truth be told, Rome and her realm were destined to become the sacred place, the seat of the successor of great Peter. And through the journey you ascribed to him, he came to learn of things that were to bring his victory, and, too, the papal mantle. Later, the chosen vessel traveled there, to bring us back assurance of that faith with which the way to our salvation starts. But why should I go there? Who sanctions it? For I am not Aeneas, am not Paul, nor I nor others think myself so worthy. Therefore, if I consent to start this journey, I fear my venture may be wild and empty. You're wise, you know far more than what I say. And just as he who unwills what he wills and shifts what he intends to seek new ends so that he's drawn from what he has begun. So was I in the midst of that dark land, because, with all my thinking, I annulled the task I had so quickly undertaken. If I had understood what you said, replied the shade of that great-hearted one, your soul has been assailed by cowardice, which often weighs so heavily on a man, distracting himself from honorable trials as phantoms frighten beasts when shadows fall. That you may be delivered from this fear, I'll tell you why I came and what I heard when I first felt compassion for your pain. I was among those souls who are suspended. A lady called to me, so blessed, so lovely that I implored to serve at her command. Her eyes surpassed the splendor of the stars, and she began to speak to me so gently and softly with an angelic voice. She said, O spirit of the courteous Mantuan, whose fame is still a presence in the world, and shall endure as long as the world lasts. My friend, who has not been the friend of fortune, is hindered in his path along the lonely hillside. He has been turned aside by terror. From all that I have heard of him in heaven, he is, I fear, already so astray that I have come to help him, much too late. Go now with your persuasive word, with all that is required to see that he escapes. Bring help to him, that I may be consoled. For I am Beatrice, who send you on. I come from where I most long to return. Love prompted me, that love which makes me speak. When once again I stand before my Lord, then I shall often let him hear your praises. Now Beatrice was silent. I began. O Lady of Virtue, the sole reason why the human race surpasses all that lies beneath the heaven with the smallest spheres, so welcome is your wish that even if it were already done, it would seem tardy. And all you need do is let me know your will. But tell me, why you have not been more prudent descending to this crater, moving from that spacious place from where you long to return. Because you want to fathom things so deeply. I now shall tell you promptly, she replied. I am not afraid to enter here. One ought to be afraid of nothing other than things possessed of power to do us harm, but things innocuous need not be feared. God in his graciousness has made me so that this, your misery, cannot touch me. I can withstand the fires flaming here. In heaven there is a gentle lady, one who weeps for the distress towards which I send you, so that stern judgment up above is shattered. And it was she who called upon Lucia, requesting of her, Now your faithful one has need of you, and I command him to you. Lucia, enemy of every cruelty, arose and made her way to where I was, sitting beside the venerable Rachel. She said, You, Beatrice, the true praise of God, why have you not helped him who loves you so that, for your sake, he's left the vulgar crowd? Do you not hear the anguish in his cry? Do you not see the death he wars against upon the river, ruthless as the sea? No one within this world has ever been so quick to seek his good or flee his harm as I, when she had finished speaking thus. To come below, down from my blessed station, I trusted in your honest utterance, which honors you and those who have listened to you. When she had finished with her words to me, she turned aside her gleaming, tearful eyes, which only made me hurry all the more. And, just as she had wished, I came to you. I snatched you from the path of the fierce beast that barred the shortest way up the fair mountain. What is it then? Why do you resist? Why does your heart host so much cowardice? Where are your daring and your openness as long as there are such blessed women concerned for you within the court of heaven, and my words promise you so great a good? As little flowers which the chill of the night has bent and huddled, when the white sun strikes glow straight and open fully on their stems, so did I, too, my exhausted force, and such warm daring rushed into my heart that I, as one who had been freed, began. Oh, she, compassionate, who has helped me, and you, who, courteous, obeyed so quickly the true words that she had addressed to you. You, with your words, have so disposed my heart to longing for this journey. I return to what I was at first prepared to do. Now go. A single will fills both of us. You are my guide, my governor, my master. These were my words to him when he advanced. I entered on the steep and savage path. Canto 3. Through me the way into the suffering city, through me the way to the eternal pain, through me the way that rungs among the lost. Justice urged on my high artificer, my maker was divine authority, the highest wisdom and the primal love. Before me nothing but eternal things were made, and I endure eternally. Abandon every hope who enter here. These words, their aspect was obscure, I read, inscribed above a gateway, and I said, Master, their meaning is difficult for me. And he, to me, as one who comprehends, here one must leave behind all hesitation. Here every cowardice must meet its death. For we have reached the place of which I spoke, where you will see the miserable people, those who have lost the good of the intellect, and when, with gladness in his face, he placed his hand upon my own to comfort me, he drew me in among the hidden things. Here, sighs and lamentations and loud cries were echoing across the starless air, so that, as soon as I set out, I wept. Strange utterances, horrible pronouncements, accents of anger, words of suffering, and the voices shrill and faint, and the beating hands, all went to make a tumult that will whirl forever through that turbid, timeless air, like sand that eddies when a whirlwind swirls. And I, my head oppressed by the horror, said, Master, what is it that I hear? Who are these people so defeated by their pain? And he said to me, This miserable way is taken by the sorry souls of those who lived without disgrace and without praise. They now commingle with the coward angels, the company of those who were not rebels, nor faithful to their God, but stood apart. The heavens, that their beauty not be lessened, have cast them out, nor will deep hell receive them. Even the wicked cannot glory in them. And I, what is it, Master, that oppresses these souls, compelling them to wail so loud? He answered, I shall tell you in few words. Those who are here can place no hope in death, and their blind life is so abject that they are envious of every other fate. Their world will let no fame of theirs endure. Both justice and compassion must disdain them. Let us not talk of them, but look and pass. And I, looking more closely, saw a banner that, as it wheeled about, raced on so quick that any respite seemed unsuited to it. Behind that banner trailed so long a file of people, I should never have believed that death could have unmade so many souls. After I had identified a few, I saw and recognized the shade of him who made, through cowardice, the great refusal. At once I understood with certainty that this company contained the cowardly, hateful to God and to his enemies. These wretched ones who never were alive went naked and were stung again by horseflies and wasps that circled them. The insects streaked their faces with their blood, which, mingled with their tears, fell at their feet, where it was gathered up by sickening worms. And then, looking beyond them, I could see a crowd along the bank of a great river. At which I said, "Allow me now to know who are these people, master, and what law has made them seem so eager for the crossing, as I can see, despite the feeble light." And he said to me, "When we have stopped along the melancholy shore of Acheron, then all these matters will be plain to you." And that, with eyes ashamed, downcast, and fearing that what I had said had given offense, I did not speak until we reached the river. And here, advancing towards us, in a boat, an aged man. His hair was white with years, was shouting, "Woe to you, corrupted souls! Forget your hope of ever seeing heaven. I've come to lead you to the other shore, to the eternal dark, to fire and frost. And you, approaching there, you living soul, keep well away from these. They are the dead." When he saw I made no move to go, he said, "Another way and other harbors, not here, will bring you passage to your shore. A lighter craft will have to carry you." My guide then, "Charon, don't torment yourself. Our passage has been willed above, where one can do what he has willed and ask no more." Now silence fell upon the woolly cheeks of Charon, pilot of the livid marsh, whose eyes were ringed about with wheels of flame. But all those spirits, naked and exhausted, had lost their color, and they gnashed their teeth as soon as they heard Charon's cruel words. They execrated God and their own parents and humankind, and then the place and time of their conception seed and of their birth. They then foregathered, huddled in one throng, weeping aloud along that wretched shore, which waits for all who have no fear of God. The demon Charon, with his eyes like embers, by signaling them, has all embark. His oar strikes anyone who stretches out. As in the autumn, leaves detach themselves, first one and then the other, till the bough seems all its fallen garments on the ground. Similarly, the evil seed of Adam descended from the shoreline one by one, when signaled as a falcon called, "Will come." So do they move across the darkened waters. Even before they reach the farther shore, new ranks already gather on this bank. "My son," the gracious master said to me, "those who have died beneath the wrath of God, all these assemble here from every country, and they are eager for the river crossing, because celestial justice spurs them on so that their fear is turned into desire. No good soul ever takes his passage here. Therefore, if Charon has complained of you, by now you can be sure what his words mean." And after this was said, the darkened plain quaked so tremendously. After this was said, the darkened plain quaked so tremendously. The memory of terror then bathed me in sweat again. A whirlwind burst out of the tear, drenched earth, a wind that crackled with a blood-red light, a light that overcame all of my senses, and, like a man whom sleep had seized, I fell. Canto 4, Inferno. The heavy sleep within my head was smashed by an enormous thunderclap, so that I started up as one whom force awakens. I stood erect and turned my rested eyes from side to side, and I stared steadily to learn what place it was surrounding me. In truth, I had found myself upon the brink of an abyss, the melancholy valley containing thundering, unending wailings. That valley, dark and deep and filled with mist, is such that, though I gazed into the pit, I was unable to discern a thing. "Let us descend into the blind world now," the poet, who was deathly pale, began. "I shall go first, and you will follow me." But I, who had seen the change in his complexion, said, "How shall I go on if you are frightened? You who have always helped dispel my doubts." And he said to me, "The anguish of the people whose place is here below has touched my face with the compassion you mistake for fear. Let us go on. The way that waits is long." So he sets out, and so he had me enter on that first circle girdling the abyss. Here, for as much as hearing could discover, there was no outcry louder than the sighs that caused the everlasting air to tremble. The sighs arose from sorrow without torments, out of the crowds, the many multitudes of infants and of women and of men. The kindly master said, "Do you not ask who are these spirits whom you see before you? I'll have you know before you go ahead. They did not sin, and yet, though they have merits, that is not enough, because they lacked baptism, the portal of the faith that you embrace. And if they lived before Christianity, they did not worship God in fitting ways, and of such spirits I myself am one. For these defects, and for no other evil, we are now lost and punished, just with this. We have no hope, and yet we live in longing." Great sorrow seized my heart upon hearing him, for I had seen some estimable men among the souls suspended in that limbo. "Tell me, my master, tell me, Lord," I then began, because I wanted to be certain of that belief which vanquishes all errors. Did any ever go, by his own merit or others, from this place toward blessedness? And he, who understood my covert speech, replied, I was new, entered on this state when I beheld a great lord enter here. The crown he wore, a sign of victory. He carried off the shade of our first father, of his son Abel, and the shade of Noah, of Moses, the obedient legislator, of his father Abraham, David, the king of Israel, his father and his sons, and Rachel, she for whom he worked so long, and many others, and he made them blessed. And I should have you know that before them there were no human souls that have been saved. We did not stay our steps. Although he spoke, we still continued onward through the wood. The wood, I say, where many spirits thronged. Our path had not gone far beyond the point where I had slept, when I beheld a fire went out against a hemisphere of shadows. We were still at a little distance from it, but not so far that I could not see in part that honorable men possessed that place. O you who honor art and science both, who are these souls whose dignity has kept their way of being separate from the rest? And he said to me, the honor of thy name, which echoes up above within your life, gains heaven's grace, and that advances them. Meanwhile, there was a voice that I could hear. Pay honor to the estimable poet. His shadow, which had left us, now returns. After that voice was done, when there was silence, I saw four giant shades approaching us in aspect. They were neither sad nor joyous. My kindly master then began by saying, Look well at him who holds that sword in hand, who moves before the other thee as the Lord. That shade is Homer, the consummate poet, and the other one is Horace, the satirist. The third is Ovid, and the last is Lucan. Because each of these spirits shares with me the name called out before by the lone voice, they welcome me, and, doing that, do well. And so I saw that splendid school assembled, led by the Lord of Song Incomparable, who, like an eagle, soars above the rest. Soon after they had talked a while together, they turned to me, saluting cordially, and having witnessed this, my master smiled. An even greater honor than mine, for they invited me to join their ranks. I was the sixth among such intellects. So did we move along and towards the light thinking of things about which silence here is just as seemly as our speech was there. We reached the base of an exalted castle, encircled 7 times by towering walls, defended on all around by a fair stream. We forded this as if upon hard ground. I entered 7 portals with these sages. We reached a meadow of green flowering plants. The people here had eyes both grave and slow. Their features carried great authority. They spoke infrequently, with gentle voices. We drew aside to one part of the meadow, an open place, both high and filled with light, and we could see all those who were assembled. Facing me there, on that enameled green, great-hearted souls were shown to me, and I still glory in having witnessed them. I saw Electra with her many comrades, along whom I knew Hector and Aeneas, and Caesar in his armor, falcon-eyed. I saw Camilla and Penthesilea. Okay. I saw Camilla and Penthesilea, and on the other side, saw King Latinus, who sat behind Lavinia, his daughter. I saw that Brutus who drove Tarquin out, Lucretia, Julia, Marcia, and Cornelia, and solitary, set-apart Saladin. When I had raised my eyes a little higher, I saw the master of men who know and seated in philosophic family. There all look up to him, all do him honor. There I beheld both Socrates and Plato, closest to him, in front of all the rest. Democritus, who ascribes the world to chance, Diogenes, Empedocles, and Zeno, and Thales, and Anaxagoras, Heraclitus. I saw the good collector of medicinals, and I mean Dioscorides, and I saw Orpheus, and Tully, Linus, Moral Seneca, and Euclid, the geometer, and Ptolemy, Hippocrates, and Galen, Avicenna, Averroes of the great commentary. I cannot here describe them all in full. My ample theme impels me onward so. What's told is often less than the event. Please forgive me for any names I butcher. The company of 6 divides in 2. My knowing guide leads me another way, beyond the quiet, into the trembling air. And I have reached a part where no thing gleams. Canto 5, Inferno. So I descended from the first enclosure, down to the second circle, that which girdles less space, but grief more great, that goads to weeping. There, the dreadful Minos stands, gnashing his teeth, examining the sins of those who enter. He judges and assigns as his tale twines. I mean that when the spirit born to evil appears before him, it confesses all, and he, the connoisseur of sin, can tell. The depth in hell appropriate to it. As many times as Minos wraps his tail around himself, that marks the sinner's level. Always there is a crowd that stands before him. Each soul in turn advances towards that judgment. They speak and hear, then they are cast below. Arresting his extraordinary task, Minos, as soon as he had seen me, said, "O you who reach this house of suffering, be careful how you enter, whom you trust. The gate is wide, but do not be deceived." To which my guide replied, "But why protest? Do not attempt to block his fated path. Our passage has been willed above, where one can do what he has willed, and ask no more." Now notes of desperation has begun to overtake my hearing. Now I come where mighty lamentation beats against me. I reach a place where every light is muted, which bellows like the sea beneath a tempest, when it is battered by opposing winds. The hellish hurricane, which never rests, drives on the spirits with its violence. Wheeling and pounding, it harasses them. When they come up against the ruined slope, then there are cries and wailing and lament, and there they curse the force of the divine. I learned that those who undergo this torment are damned because they have sinned within the flesh, subjecting reason to the rule of lust. And as, in the cold season, starlings' wings bear them along in broad and crowded ranks, so does that blast bear on the guilty spirits. Now here, now there, now down, now up, it drives them. There is no hope that ever comforts them, no hope for rest, and none for lesser pain. And just as cranes in flight will chant their lays, arraying their long file across the air, so did the shades I saw approaching, borne by that assailing wind, lament and moan, so that I asked him, "Master, who are those who suffer punishment in this dark air?" "The first of those about whose history you want to know," my master then told me, "once ruled as an empress over many nations. Her vice of lust had become so customary that she made license illicit in her laws to free her from the scandal she had caused. She is Semiramis, one of whom we read that she was Ninus's wife and his successor. She held the land the Sultan now commands. That other spirit killed herself for love, and she betrayed the ashes. Zacchaeus, the wanton Cleopatra, follows next. See Helen, for whose sake so many years of evil had to pass. See great Achilles, who finally met love in his last battle. See Paris, Tristan, and as he pointed out and named to me more than 1,000 shades departed from our life because of love. No sooner had I heard my teacher's name, the ancient ladies and the knights, than pity seized me, and I was like a man astray. My first words, "Poet, I should willingly speak with those two who go together there and seem so lightly carried by the wind." And he said to me, "You'll see when they draw closer to us, and then you may appeal to them by that love which impels them. They will come." No sooner had the wind bent them towards us than I urged on my voice, "O battered souls, if one does not forbid it, speak with us." Even as doves, when summoned by desire, borne forward by their will, move through the air with wings uplifted, still to their sweet nest. Those spirits left the ranks where Dido suffers, approaching us through the malignant air, so powerful had been my loving cry. O living being, gracious and benign, who through the darkened air have come to visit our souls that stained the world with blood. If he who rules the universe were friend to us, then we should pray to him to give you peace, for you have pitied our atrocious state. Whatever pleases you to hear and speak will please us, too, to hear and speak with you. Now, while the wind is silent in this place, the land where I was born lies on that shore, to where the Po, together with the waters that follow it, descends to final rest. Love, that can quickly seize the gentle heart, took hold of him because of the fair body that taken from me. How that was done still wounds me. Love that releases no beloved from loving took hold of me so strongly through his beauty that, as you see, has not left me yet. Love led the two of us unto one death. Cain waits for him who took our life. These words were borne across from them to us. When I had listened to these injured souls, I bent my head and held it low until the poet asked of me, "What are you thinking?" When I replied, my words began. Alas, how many gentle thoughts, how deep a longing had led them to the agonizing pass. Then I addressed my speech again to them, and I began. Francesca, your afflictions move me to tears of sorrow and of pity. But tell me, in the time of gentle sighs, with what way did love allow you to recognize your still uncertain longings? And she told me, there is no greater sorrow than thinking back upon a happy time in misery, and this your teacher knows. Yet if you long so much to understand the first root of our love, then I shall tell my tale to you as one who weeps and speaks. One day, to pass the time away, we read of Lancelot, how love had overcome him. We were not alone, and we suspected nothing. And time again that reading led to our eyes to meet and made our faces pale. And yet one point alone defeated us. When we had read how the desired smile was kissed by one who was so true a lover, this one, who shall never be parted from me, while all his body trembled, kissed my mouth. The gala halt indeed, that book while he wrote it too. That day we read no more. And while one spirit said those words to me, the other wept, so that, because of pity, I fainted, as if I had met my death. And then I fell, as a dead body falls. Canto 6, Inferno. Upon my mind's reviving, it had closed on hearing the lament of those two kindred, since sorrow had confused me completely. I see new sufferings, new sufferers surrounding me on every side, wherever I move or turn about or set my eyes. I am in the third circle, filled with cold, unending, heavy, and accursed rain. Its measure and its kind are never changed. Gross hailstones, water gray with filth, and snow come streaking down across the shadowed air. The earth, as it receives that shower, stinks. Over the souls of those submerged beneath that mess is an outlandish, vicious beast, its three throats barking, dog-like, Cerberus. His eyes are blood red, greasy, black. His belly bulges, and his hands are claws. His talons tear and flay and rend the shades. That downpour makes the sinners howl like dogs. They use one of their sides to screen the other. Those miserable wretches turn and turn. When Cerberus, the great worm, noticed us, he opened wide his mouth, showed us his fangs. There was no part of him that did not twitch. My guide opened his hands to their full span, plucked out some earth, and with his fists filled full, he hurled it straight to those famished jaws. Just as a dog that barks with greedy hunger will then fall quiet when he gnaws his food, intent and straining hard to cram it in, so were the filthy faces of the demon Cerberus transformed. After he'd stunned the spirits so, they wished that they were deaf. We walked across the shades on whom there were thuds and that heavy rain, and set our souls upon their empty images that seemed like persons. And all those spirits lay upon the ground, except for one who sat erect as soon as he caught sight of us in front of him. "Oh, you who are conducted through this hell," he said to me, "recall me, if you can, for you, before I was unmade, were made." And I said to him, "It is perhaps your anguish that snatches you out of my memory, so that it seems that I have never seen you. But tell me who you are, you who are set in such a dismal place, such punishment. If other pains are more, none's more disgusting." And he said to me, your city one so full of envy that it's always spilled. That city held me in the sunlit life. The name you citizens gave me was Siaco, And for the damning sin of gluttony, as you can see, I languish in the rain. And I, a wretched soul, am not alone. For all of these have the same penalty, for the same sin. And he said nothing more. I answered him, Siako, your suffering so weighs on me that I am forced to weep. But tell me, if you know, what end awaits the citizens of that divided city? Is any just man there? Tell me the reason why it has been assaulted by so much schism. And he said to me, after long controversy, they'll come to blood. The party of the woods will chase the other out with much offense. But then, within 3 suns, they too must fall, at which the other party will prevail, using the power of one who taxes sails. This party will hold high its head up for long and heap great weights upon its enemies, however much they weep indignantly. 2 men are just, but no one listens to them. 3 sparks that set on fire every heart are envy, pride, and avariciousness. With this, his words, inciting tears, were done. And I, to him, I would learn more from you. I ask you for a gift of further speech. Teghaio, Farinata, men so worthy, Arrigo, Mosca, Jacopo, Restacucci, and all the rest whose minds bent towards the good. Do tell me where they are, and let me meet them, for my great longing drives me on to learn if heaven sweetens or hell poisons them. And they are among the blackest souls. A different sin had dragged them to the bottom. If you descend so low, there you can see them. But when you have returned to the sweet world, I pray, recall me to men's memory. I say no more to you. Answer no more. Then his straight gaze grew twisted and awry, and he looked at me a while, then bent his head. He fell as low as all his blind companions, and my guide said to me, he'll rise no more until the blast of the angelic trumpet upon the coming of the hostile judge. Each one shall see his sorry tomb again, and once again take on his flesh and form, and hear what shall resound eternally. So did we pass across that squalid mixture of shadows and of rain. Our steps slowed down, talking a while about the life to come. At which I said, and after the great sentence, O Master, will those torments grow, or else be less? Or will they be just as intense? And he said to me, remember now your science, which says that when a thing has more perfection, so much the greater is its pain or pleasure. Through these accursed sinners never shall attain the true perfection, yet they can expect to be more perfect than they are now. We took the circling way traced by that road. We said much more than I can here recount. We reached the point that marks the downward slope. Here we found Plutus, the great enemy. Canto 7, Inferno. Pape Satan, Alepe. So Plutus with his grating voice began. The gentle sage, aware of everything, said reassuringly, don't let your fear defeat you. For whatever power he has, he cannot stop our climbing down this crag. Then he turned towards Plutus's swollen face and said to him, be quiet, cursed wolf. Let your vindictiveness feed on yourself. His is no random journey to the deep. It has been wheeled on high, where Michael took revenge upon arrogant rebellion. as sails inflated by the wind collapse, entangled in a heap, when the mast cracks so that that ferocious beast fell to the ground. Thus we make our way down to the fourth ditch, to take in more of that despondent shore, where all of the universe's ill is stored. Justice of God, who has amassed as many strange tortures and travails as I have seen, why do we let our guilt consume us so? Even as waves that break above Charybdis, each shattering the other when they meet, so must the spirits here dance their round dance. Here, more than elsewhere, I saw multitudes to every side of me. Their howls were loud, while, wheeling weights, they used their chests to push. They struck against each other at that point. Each turned around and, wheeling back those weights, cried out, "Why do you hoard? Why do you squander?" So did they move around the sorry circle, from left and right to the opposing point. Again they cried their chant of scorn. And so when each of them had changed positions, he circled halfway back to his next joust, and I, who felt my heart almost pierced through, requested, "Master, show me now what shades are these, and tell me if they were all clerics. Those tonsured ones who circle on our left." Pardon me? And he said to me, all these, to left and right, were so squint-eyed, eyed of mind in the first life. No spending that they did was done with measure. Their voices bark this out with clarity. When they have reached the 2 points of the circle, where their opposing guilts divide their ranks. These to the left, their heads bereft of hair, were clergymen, and popes and cardinals, within whom avarice works its excess. And I to him, "Master, among this kind, I certainly might hope to recognize some who have been bespattered by these crimes." And he said to me, "That thought of yours is empty. The undiscerning life that made them filthy now renders them unrecognizable. For all eternity they'll come to blows. These here will rise up from their sepulchres with fists clenched tight, and these with their hair cropped close. Ill-giving and ill-keeping have robbed both of the fair world and set them to their fracas. With that is like, my words need not embellish. Now you can see, my son, how brief's the sport of all those goods that are in fortune's care, for which the tribe of men contend and brawl. For all the gold that is or ever was beneath the moon could never offer rest to even one of these exhausted spirits. Master, I ask of him, now tell me too, this fortune whom you have touched upon now, what's she, who clutches so all the world's goods? And he said to me, O unenlightened creatures, how deep the ignorance that hampers you. I want you to digest my word on this. You who made the heavens and who gave them guides was he whose wisdom transcends everything, that every part may shine unto the other. He had the light apportioned equally, similarly, for the worldly splendors. He ordained a general minister and guide to shift from time to time those empty goods from nation unto nation, clan to clan, in ways that human reason can't prevent. Just so, one people rules, one languishes, obeying the decision she has given, which, like a serpent in the grass, is hidden. Your knowledge cannot stand against her force, for she foresees and judges and maintains her kingdom as the other gods do theirs. The changes that she brings are without respite. It is necessity that makes her swift, and for this reason, men change state so often. She is the one so frequently maligned, even by those who should give praise to her. They blame her wrongfully with words of scorn. But she is blessed and does not hear these things, for with the other primal beings, happy, she turns her sphere and glories in her bliss. But now let us descend to greater sorrow, for every star that rose when I first moved is setting now. We cannot stay long. We crossed the circle to the other shore. We reached a foaming watercourse that spills into a trench formed by its overflow. That stream was even darker than the deep purple, and we, together with those shadowed waves, moved downward along a strange pathway. When it has reached the foot of those that malign gray slopes, that melancholy stream descends, forming a swamp that bears the name of Styx. And I, who was intent on watching it, could make out muddied people in that slime, all naked and their faces furious. These struck each other not with hands alone, but with their heads and chests and their feet, and tore each other piecemeal with their teeth. The kindly master told me, "Son, now we see the souls of those whom anger has defeated. And I should also have you know for certain that underneath the water there are souls who sigh and make this plain of water bubble, as your eye, looking anywhere, can tell. Wedged in the slime, they say, we have been sullen in the sweet air that is gladdened by the sun. We bore the mist of sluggishness in us. Now we are bitter in the blackened mud. This hymn they have to gurgle in their gullets because they cannot speak it in full words. And so, between the dry shore and the swamp, we circled much of the disgusting pond, our eyes upon the swallowers of slime. We came, at last, upon a tower's base. I will return in a moment after I use the restroom. Canto 8, Inferno. I say, continuing, that long before we two had reached the foot of that tall tower, our eyes had risen upward towards its summit. Because of two small flames that flickered there, while still another flame returned their signal, so far off that it was scarcely visible. And I turned towards the sea of all good sense. I said, "What does this mean? And what reply comes from that other fire? Who kindled it?" And he to me, "Above the filthy waters, you can already see what waits for us, if it's not hid by vapors from the marsh. Bowstring has not thrust itself an arrow. Bowstring has not thrust from itself an arrow that ever rushed as swiftly through the air as did the little bark that at that moment." I saw, as it skimmed towards us in the water, a solitary boatman at its helm. I heard him howl, "Now you are caught, foul soul." "Oh, Phlegyas, Phlegyas, such a shout is useless this time," my master said. "We are yours no longer. Then it would take to cross the muddy slice. We're yours no longer than it would take to cross the muddy sluice." And just as one who hears some great deception that was done to him, and then resents it, so was Phlegyas when he had sworn, when he had to store his anger. My guide preceded me into the boat. Once he was in, he had me follow him. There seemed to be no wait until I boarded. No sooner were my guide and I embarked than off that ancient prow went, cutting water more deeply than it does when bearing others. And while we steered across the stagnant channel, before me stood a sinner thick with mud, saying, "Who are you? Come before your time." And I told him, "I've come, but I don't stay. But who are you, who have become so ugly?" He answered, "You can see I am one who weeps." And I to him, "In weeping and in grieving, accursed spirit, may you long remain. Though you are disguised by filth, I know your name." Then he stretched both his hands out towards the boat, at which my master quickly shoved him back, saying, "Be off there with the other dogs." That done, he threw his arms around my neck and kissed my face and said, "Indignant soul, blessed is she who bore you in her womb." When in the world, he was presumptuous. There is no good to gild his memory, and so his shade down here is hot with fury. How many up above now count themselves great kings, who will wallow here like pigs in slime, leaving behind foul memories of their crimes? And I, "O master, I am very eager to see that spirit soused within this broth before we made our way across the lake." And he to me, "Before this other shore comes into your view, you shall be satisfied. To gratify so fine a wish is right." Soon after I had heard these words, I saw the money sinners so dismember him, that even now I praise and thank God for it. They were all shouting at Filippo Argenti. At this, the Florentine, gone wild with spleen, began to turn his teeth against himself. We left him there. I tell no more of him, but in my ears so loud a wailing pounded that I leaned forward, all intent to see. The kindly master said, "My son, this city that bears the name of Dis is drawing near, with its grave citizens, its great battalions." I said, "I can already see the distinctly, master, the mosquitoes that gleam within the valley, as crimson as if they had just been drawn out the fire." He told me, the eternal flame burning there appears to make them red, as you can see, within this lower hell. So we arrive inside this deep-cut trenches that are the moats of the despondent land. The ramparts seem to me to be of iron. But not before we ranged in a wide circuit did we approach a place where that shrill pilot shouted, "Get out! The entranceway is here." About the gates I saw more than 1,000 who once had reigned from heaven, and they cried in anger, "Who is this who, without death, can journey through the kingdom of the dead?" And my wise master made a sign that said he wanted to speak secretly to them. Then they suppressed somewhat their great disdain and said, "You come alone. Let him be gone, for he was reckless entering this realm. Let him return alone on this mad road, or try to, if he can, since you, his guide, across so dark a land. You are here to stay. Consider, reader, my dismay before the sounds of this abominable words. Returning here seems so impossible. Oh, my dear guide, who more than 7 times had given back to me my confidence and snatched me from the deep danger they had menaced. Do not desert me when I am so undone, and if they will not let us pass beyond, let us retrace our steps together, quickly." These were my words. The Lord who let me here replied, "Forget your fear. No one can hinder our passage. One so great had granted it. But you wait here for me, and feed and comfort your tired spirit with good hope, for I will not abandon you in this low world." So he goes on his way. That gentle father had left me here to wait and hesitate for yes and no contend within my head. I could not hear what he was telling him, but he had not been long with them when each ran back into the city, scrambling fast. And these, our adversaries, slammed the gates in my lord's face, and he remained outside. Then, with slow steps, turned back again to me. His eyes turned to the ground, his brows deprived of every confidence. He says with sighs, "See who has kept me from the house of sorrow." To me he added, "You, though I am vexed, must not be daunted. I shall win this contest. Whoever tries within to block our way. This insolence of theirs is nothing new. They used it once before, at a gate less secret. It is still without its bolts, the place where you made out the fatal text, and now, already within that gate, across the circles, and alone, descends the one who will unlock this realm for us." Canto 9. The color cowardice displayed in me when I saw that my guide was driven back made him more quickly mask his own new pallor. He stood alert, like an attentive listener, because his eyes could hardly journey far across that black air and the heavy fog. We have to win this battle," he began. "If not, but one so great had offered help. How slow that someone's coming seems to me. But I saw well enough how he had covered his first words with the words that followed after, so different from what he had said before. Nevertheless, his speech made me afraid, because I drew out from his broken phrase a meaning worse, perhaps, than he intended. Does anyone from the first circle, one whose only punishment is crippled hope, ever descend so deep in this sad hollow? That was my question, and he answered so. It is quite rare for one of us to go along the way that I have taken now. But I, in truth, have been here once before. And that savage witch, Erictho, she who called the shades back to their bodies, summoned me. My flesh had not been long stripped off when she had me descend through all the rings of hell to draw a spirit back from Judas's circle. That is the deepest and darkest place, the farthest from heaven that girds all. So rest assured, I know the pathway well. This swamp that breathes and breathes the giant stench surrounding the city of the sorrowing which now we cannot enter without anger. And he said more, but I cannot remember, because my eyes had wholly taken me to that high tower with the glowing summit, where, at one single point, there suddenly stood the three infernal furies flecked with blood, who had the limbs of women and their ways, but wore, as girdles, the snakes of deepest green. Small serpents and horned vipers formed their hairs, and these were used to bind their bestial temples. And he who knew these handmaidens well, they served the queen of the never-ending lamentation. That they served the queen of the never-ending lamentation, said, Look at the ferocious Arañez. Arañez? That is Megara on the left, and she who weeps upon the right is Alecto. Tisiphone between them. He was done. Each fury tore her breast with taloned nails, each with her palms beat on herself and wailed so loud that I, in fear, drew near the poet. Just let Medusa come, then we shall turn him to stone, they all cried, looking down. We should have punished Theseus's assault. Turn round and keep your eyes shut fast, or should the Gorgon show herself, and you behold her, never again would you return above, my master said. And he himself turned me around, and, not content with just my hands, used his as well to cover up my eyes. O you possessed of sturdy intellects, observe the teaching that is hidden here, beneath the veil of verses so obscure. And now, across the turbid waves, there passed a reboantic fracas, horrid sound, enough to make both the shorelines quake. A sound not other than a wind's when, wild because it must contend with warmer currents, it strikes against the forest without let. Shattering, beating down, bearing off branches, as it moves proudly, clouds of dust before it, and puts to flight both animals and shepherds. He freed my eyes and said, Now let your optic nerve turn directly towards that ancient foam, there where the mist is thickest and most acrid. As frogs confronted by their enemy, the snake will scatter underwater till each hunches in a deep along the bottom. And so did the 1,000 ruined souls I saw take flight before a figure crossing Styx, who walked as if on land and with dry soles. He thrust away the thick air from his face, waving his left hand frequently before him. That seemed the only task that wearied him. I knew well that he was heaven's messenger, and I turned towards my master, and he made a sign that I be still and bow before him. How full of high disdain he seemed to me. He came up to the gate, and with a wand he opened it, for there was no resistance. "O you cast out of heaven, hated crowd," were his first words upon that horrid threshold. "Why do you harbor this presumptuousness? Why are you so reluctant to endure that will whose aims can never be cut short, and which so often added to your hurts? What good is it to thrust against the fates? Your Cerberus, if you remember well, for that, had both his throat and chin stripped clean. At that he turned and took the filthy road and did not speak to us, but he had the look of one who is obsessed by other cares. Then those that press and gnaw at those before him. But he had the look of one who is obsessed by other cares than those that press and gnaw at those before him. And we moved forward, on into the city, in safety, having heard his holy words. We made our way inside without a struggle, and I, who wanted so much to observe the state of things, that such a fortress guarded, as soon as I had entered, looked about. I saw on every side a spreading plain of lamentation and atrocious pain. Just as at just as at Arlis, where Rhone becomes a marsh, just as Pola, Quarnero's Gulf that closes Italy and bathes its borders, the sepulchres that make all the plain uneven, so they did here on every side, except that here the sepulchres were much more harsh. For flames were scattered through the tombs, and these had kindled all of them to glowing heat. No artisan could ask for hotter iron. The lid of every tomb was lifted up, and from each tomb such a sorry cries arose as could come only from the sad and hurt. And I, Master, who can these people be who, buried in great chests of stone like these, must speak by ways of sighs and agony? And he said to me, here are the arch-heretics and those who followed them, from every sect. Those tombs are much more crowded than you think. Here, like he has been insepulchred with like, some monuments are heated more, some less. And then he turned around, and to his right, we passed between the torments and high walls. Canto 10, Inferno. Now, by a narrow path that ran between these torments and the ramparts of the city, my master moves ahead, I following. O highest virtue, you who lead me through these circles of transgression, at your will, do speak to me and satisfy my longings. Can those who lie within the sepulchres be seen? The lids, in fact, have all been lifted. No guardian is watching over them. And he said to me, they'll all be shuttered up when they return home from Jehoshaphat together with the flesh they left above. Within this region is the cemetery of Epicurus and his followers. Epicurus and his followers, all those who say the soul dies with the body. And soon you have asked of me. And so the question you have asked of me will soon find satisfaction while we're here, as will the longing you have hid from me. And I, good guide, the only reason I have hid my heart was that I might speak briefly, and you, long since, encouraged me in this. O Tuscan, you who pass alive across the fiery city with such seemly words, be kind enough to stay your journey here. Your accent makes it clear that you belong among the natives of the noble city. I may have dealt with too vindictively. This sound had burst so unexpectedly out of one sepulchre that, trembling, I then drew a closer look to my guide. But he told me, turn round, what are you doing? That's Fairy Nata who has risen there. You will see all of him from the waist up. My eyes were already intent on his, and up he rose, his forehead and his chest, as if he had tremendous scorn for hell. My guide, his hands encouraging and quick, thrust me between the sepulchres towards him, saying, your words must be appropriate. When I had drawn closer to his sepulchre, he glanced at me, as if in disdain. He asked me, who were your ancestors? Because I wanted so to be compliant, I hid no thing from him. I told him all. At this, he lifted up his brows a bit, then said, they were ferocious enemies of mine, and of my parents and my party, so that I had to scatter them twice over. If they were still driven out, I answered him, they still returned, both times, from every quarter. But yours were never quick to learn that art. At this there rose another shade alongside, uncovered to my sight down to his chin. I think that he had risen on his knees. He looked around me, just as if he had longed to see I had come with someone else. But then, his expectation spent, he said in tears, if it is your high intellect that let you journey here, through this blind prison, where is my son? Why is he not with you? I answered, my own powers have not brought me, He who awaits me there leads me through there. Perhaps to one your your Guido did disdain. His words, the nature of his punishment, these had already led me read his name. Therefore, my answer was fully made. Then suddenly erect, he cried, "What's that? He did disdain? He did disdain? He is not alive? The sweet light does not strike against his eyes?" And when he noticed how I hesitated a moment in my answer, he fell back and did not show himself again. But that great-hearted one, the other shade at whose request I'd stayed, did not change aspect or turn aside his head or lean or bend. And taking up his words where he'd left off, "If they were slow," he said, "to learn that art, that is more torment than to me than this bed. And yet the lady who is ruler here will not have her face kindled 50 times before you learn how heavy is that art. And so may you return to the sweet world. Tell me, why are those citizens so cruel against my kin in all of their decrees?" To which I said, "The carnage, the great bloodshed that stained the waters of their Arvia red, had led us to such prayers in our temple." He sighed and shook his head, then said, "In that I did not act alone, but certainly I have not joined the others without cause. But where I was alone was there where all the rest would have annihilated Florence, had I not interceded forcefully. As I hope your seed may yet find peace," I asked, "so may you help me to undo that knot that here had snarled my course of thought. It seems, if I hear right, that you can see beforehand that which time is carrying, but you're denied the sight of present things." "We see, even as men who are far-sighted, those things," he said, "that are remote from us. The highest Lord allots us that much light. But when events draw near, or are, our minds are useless. We were not informed by others. We should know nothing of your human state. So you can understand how our awareness will die completely at the moment when the portal of the future has been shut." Then, as if penitent for my omission, I said, "Will you now tell that fallen man his son is still among the living ones? And if, a while ago, I held my tongue before his question, let him know it was because I had in mind the doubt you've answered." And now my master was recalling me, so that, more hurriedly, I asked the spirit to name the others who were there with him. He said more than 1,000 lie with me. The second Frederick is but one among them, as is the cardinal. I name no others. With that he hid himself, and pondering the speech that seemed to me so menacing, I turned my steps to meet the ancient poet. He moved ahead, and as we made our way, he said to me, "Why are you so dismayed?" I satisfied him, answering him fully, and in that stage exhorted me, "Remember the words that have been spoken here against you. Now pay attention," as he raised a finger. "When you shall stand before the gentle splendor of one whose gracious eyes see everything, then you shall learn, from her, your lifetime's journey." Following that, his steps turned to the left, leaving the wall and moving towards the middle, along a path that strikes into a valley, whose stench, as it rose up, disgusted us. Canto 11, Inferno. Along the upper rim of a high bank formed by a ring of massive broken boulders, we came above a crowd more cruelly pent, and here, because of the outrageous stench thrown up in excess by that deep abyss, we drew back till we were behind the lid of a great tomb, on which I had made out this inscribed: I hold Pope Anastasius enticed to leave the true path by Photinus. It would be better to delay descent so that our senses may grow somewhat used to the foul stench, and then we can ignore it. So said my master, and I answered him. Do find some compensation, lest this time be lost. And you see, I thought of that. My son, within this ring of broken rocks, he then began. There are 3 smaller circles, like those that you are leaving. They range down. Those circles are all full of cursed spirits, so that your seeing of them may suffice. Learn now how and why of their confinement. Of every malice that earns hate in heaven, injustice is the end, and each such end, by force or fraud, brings harm to other men. However, fraud is man's particular vice. God finds it more displeasing, and therefore the fraudulent are lower, suffering more. The violent take all of the first circle, but since one uses force against 3 persons, that circle's built of 3 dividing. But since one uses force against 3 persons, that circle's built of 3 divided rings. To God and to one's self and to one's neighbor, to them, or what is theirs, one can do violence. As you shall now hear clearly. Violent death and painful wounds may be inflicted on one's neighbor. His possessions may suffer ruin, fire, and extortion. Thus, murderers and those who strike in malice, as well as plunderers and robbers, these, in separated ranks, the first ring racks. A man can set violent hands against himself or his belongings, so within. The second ring repents, though uselessly, whoever would deny himself your world, gambling away, wasting his patrimony, and weeping where he should instead be happy. One can be violent against the Godhead, one's heart's denying and blaspheming him, and scorning nature and the good in her. So with its sign, the smallest ring has sealed both Sodom and Cahors, and all those who speak in passionate contempt of God. Now fraud, that eats away at every conscience, is practiced by a man against other who trust him, or one who has no trust. This latter way seems only to cut off the bond of love that nature forges. Thus, nestled within the second circle are hypocrisy and flattery, sorcerers and falsifiers, simony and theft, and barraters and panderers, and like trash. But in the former way of fraud, not only the love that nature forges is forgotten, but added love that builds a special trust. Thus, in the tightest circle, there is the universe's crater, the seat of Diz. All traitors are consumed eternally. Master, your reasoning is clear indeed, I said. It has made plain for me the nature of this pit and the population in it. But tell me, those the dense marsh holds, or those driven before the wind, or those whom the rain falls, or those who clash with such harsh tongues, why are they not all punished in the city of flaming red if God is angry with them? And if he is not, then why are they tormented? And then to me, why does your reason wander so far from its accustomed course, he said. Or of what other things are you now thinking? Have you forgotten, then, the words with which your ethics treats those 3 dispositions that strike at heaven's will, incontinence and malice and mad bestiality? and how the fault that is the least condemned and the least offends gods is incontinence. If you consider carefully this judgment and call to mind the souls of the upper hell who bear the penalties outside the city, you'll see why they have been set off from those unrighteous ones, and why, when heaven's vengeance hammers at them, it carries lesser anger. O sun that heals all sight that is perplexed when I ask you, your answer so contents that doubting pleases me as much as knowing. Your answer is so contense that doubting pleases me as much as knowing. Go back a little to the point, I said, where you told me that usury offends divine goodness. Unravel now that knot. Philosophy, for one who understands, points out, and not in just one place, he said, how nature follows as she takes her course. The divine intellect and divine art. And if you read your physics carefully, not many pages from the start, you'll see that when it can, your art will follow nature. Just as a pupil imitates his master, so that your art is almost God's grandchild. From those two, art and nature, it is fitting, if you recall how Genesis begins, for men to make their way, to gain their living. And since the usurer prefers another pathway, he scorns both nature and herself, and art her follower. His hope is elsewhere. But follow me, for it is time to move. The fishes glitter now on the horizon. All that wane is spread out over Carus. Only beyond can one climb down the cliff.